Hello everyone, welcome to the Generation Y Conservative Podcast. I'm glad that you could join me tonight. It's been a couple weeks now. As you can see, I'm in a little bit new surroundings, and if you can faintly see what's going on behind me, the studio's starting to come along. We have a design coming in the background here, and that will continue to grow as the weeks go on here. My co-host is not with me tonight. He actually went on a family trip, but we're going to be talking about a couple things tonight, including entertainment, some really funny stories, some outrageous stories. We're going to get into what's going on with the Kavanaugh hearing right now in regards to where it stands and the accuser and what Spartacus had to say about everything. Also, we're going to be talking about the Kapernick ad as well and what was going on with that. There's been a lot of big topics that we've missed over the last 3 weeks since the last time I saw you, but we're going to get into all that and more. This is the Generation Y Conservative Podcast. All right, thank you for joining me tonight on the Generation Y Conservative Podcast, where the truth is greater than agenda. If you're watching right now, you may be watching on Facebook Live. If you are, get involved and participate and start making comments on the video and everything. I'll try to give a shout out to you and answer questions or respond to your comments and everything while we're live on the podcast. Also, while you're there, head over to the Generation Y Conservative Facebook fan page, hit like and get notifications so you know when we go live. It is Friday night, so if you're watching right now, you don't have a life. But you can certainly always tune back in because this is available on Facebook. And after I get done editing it with the final version, you can see all the video clips and everything else that go into it. You can actually find it on YouTube in all its HD audio and video glory. Just head over to YouTube and search for the Generation Y Conservative Podcast. You can find that there. Hit subscribe and hit the bell for notifications on that. You can also get involved on Twitter. Just search for the Generation Y Conservative on there as well. It's at Gen Y Conservative without the E on the end. If you're interested in listening to the audio portion of the podcast, you can always find that on Sundays, re-aired from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLRN Internet Radio, where they have also put me onto iTunes, iHeartRadio, the Google Podcast Store, and Spreaker as well. So if you're an audio person and you don't want to look at me, I completely understand that. I got a face for radio. It makes sense. But you can always download the podcast there on any of those platforms as well. So as I mentioned, to start, we're going to actually go into some entertainment things with, starting off, a big trailer release this week. Let's take a look.
War is a universal language. I know a renegade soldier when I see one. Never occurred to me that one might come from above. Space invasion, big car chase. Truth be told, I was ready to hang it up till I met you today. So you're not from around here?
It's hard to explain. I keep having these memories. I see flashes. I think I had a life here. But I can't tell if it's real.
We have no idea what threats are out there. We can't do this alone. We need you.
I'm not what you think I am.
So that's Captain Marvel. And it's the beginning of the next phase of Marvel coming out next year in the spring as a precursor to the follow-up part 2 of the Avengers, Infinity War. Now, if you saw Infinity War, then you realize what a big deal this is, because spoiler alert, if you don't want to know what happened at the end of Infinity War, tune out now for just a couple seconds. But essentially, Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson's character, took out a beeper right before he was evaporated and paged Captain Marvel to come and save them in a code red situation. If you're unfamiliar with the comics, Captain Marvel is the most powerful member of the Avengers team. And so they are introducing her into the Marvel Universe. And actually, as a matter of fact, news just came out within the last day or two that Fahey is actually going to be now officially in charge of the next iteration of the X-Men franchise, since that was officially turned over to Disney as well. So you can expect a very X-Men heavy Marvel universe coming up from Disney as well, and getting them all involved with the Avengers, which is just, it's phenomenal. But one of the things that I think is really, really interesting to point out with this trailer is the fact that Nick Fury and Agent Coulson are showing up again. Nick Fury without the eye patch, we're obviously going to see what actually happens to his eye in that situation, but they use the same de-aging technology with CGI and everything else that they were doing with the Ant-Man and the Wasp franchise, with what they did to Michael Douglas and Michelle Pfeiffer in that as well. So they're saying that this movie took that even a step further. You can see that those two look a lot younger, and it's just amazing what they're able to do with these things now. I'm personally really excited about Captain Marvel. Apparently she was getting some haters online, and whatever. That doesn't really matter too much. Also, keeping within the entertainment industry here, I'm going to do this like what's the guy's name? I'm talking to my producer here. Alex Jones. Never mind. I don't need you. Go back to your work. Alex Jones, everything, he always gets it from top level sources. I have it from top level sources in the ABC news right here that Bert and Ernie are gay. So this is according to a Sesame Street writer. It says popular Sesame Street characters Bert and Ernie are apparently gay. This according to ABC15.com. The writer of Sesame Street, Mark Saltzman, told QWERTY, I always felt that without a huge agenda, when I was writing Bert and Ernie, they were. Saltzman went on to say, I can't remember pitching to the education department, the gatekeepers of the curriculum, gay content just to get it off of my conscience, and I can remember being stonewalled in a way that it made me think it was a lost cause. Now, interestingly enough, Frank Oz, the creators of the Muppets on Sesame Street and everything, said that had the best response to this. He said, Bert and Ernie aren't gay, they're puppets. That is by far the best explanation that you can go with on that. But keeping with that topic, actually, there's another Sesame Street related news piece here. Now, this according to top level executives at the New York Post. Pampers is ditching Sesame Street diapers amid gender concerns. Like you're ever going to solve that one. It says the characters from Sesame Street are quietly being pulled from Pampers, and it might be because they're mostly dudes. In a major move this summer that hasn't been officially announced, the world's biggest diaper brand has quietly wiped characters like Elmo, Big Bird, Cookie Monster, and Oscar the Grouch from most of its diapers. No wonder he's a grouch. You keep him in a trash can. The stealthy Muppet removal was confirmed by officials at Sesame Street and Procter & Gamble, the consumer products giant that makes Pampers. But when asked by the Post, spokespeople were cagey about the responses. They go on to ask a bunch of different people. But obviously, Pampers, diaper company, ditching Sesame Street. We always knew that obviously they were full of She knew what I was going to say back there. I'm not going to say it, though. It's okay. Okay, moving on here. Okay, this was pretty interesting. So we're keeping in the entertainment industry here. We're going to go into sports a little bit. it's pretty interesting. Now, Serena Williams, within the last year, I think it was, had a child and was off the courts for a while and everything, and then came back big time. She was playing phenomenally. I don't watch tennis. I know who some of the bigs are and everything because my mom watches tennis all the time. I happened to be at my parents' house when the second to last game was on, and Serena won that one to go on and play against in the finals and everything. And she was so gracious in her winning. She said, no matter what happens in the finals here, I'm just super excited to be here. I'm a winner no matter what, because just to be able to come back from this pregnancy, and apparently she almost died from that pregnancy as well, through major complications or something. She said, just to be here today playing is a win for me, and I'm just really excited. Very gracious about the whole thing. So I thought, wow, she was really awesome about the whole thing. Then I didn't get to see the finals, but let's take a look at what happened when the sideline guy got involved that was watching the match. What do they call that guy? Umpire? I think it is umpire. What do you say?
The judge?
Is it judge or... You're supposed to know these things. Come on. All right, that's okay. Let's just see what happened on the court then.
I have never cheated in my life. I have a daughter and I stand what's right for her, and I've never cheated. And you owe me an apology. You will never do that. That's not right. This is not fair. This has happened to me too many times. This is not fair. This is not fair. But to give me a point to lose a game for what we're saying, that is not fair.
At the cost her a game penalty.
Say it. Say you're sorry. Well, then don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. You stole a point from me. You're a thief too.
Yeah, but calling him a thief was really what put it over the top.
I mean, it's really not. Yeah. Right. But you know how many other men do things that are. I don't think they do much worse than that. This is not fair. There's a lot of men out here that have said a lot of things, and because they're men, that doesn't happen to them. I'm here fighting for women's rights and for women's equality and for all kinds of stuff. And for me to say thief and for him to take a game, it made me feel like it was a sexist remark. I mean, like, how he's never took a game from a man because they said thief. For me, it blows my mind.
Okay, so it is umpire. While you were watching that, I was actually looking up and trying to figure out what the heck was going on. But what's interesting about this whole thing is what the umpire said that she did is that she was doing hand signals back and forth with the coach, which is against the rules of the game, and she got called out on it. She threw down her racket in a fit of rage and started going on a temper tantrum to rival her own children. Now, I've gotten some criticism back and forth on this myself, but what you can see in this clip is actually Serena Williams talking to one of the main people of the event that was doing this and throwing a fit over that men have not been called out for doing much worse. I think it was McEnroe who used to throw the tennis rackets around. He was the bad boy of tennis, which is kind of a funny term if you ask me, because tennis isn't that intense of a sport. Let's go with this. Maybe she's right. Maybe men have gotten away with more in the past, but as you can see, the rules are always changing in regards to sport, especially in the NFL. You're not even allowed to tackle the freaking quarterback anymore. We're getting to a point of flag football. So the days of McEnroe and his temper tantrums are basically over, and it seems like a lot more has been put into place for these types of things. Did she throw a temper tantrum? Yes, she did. She threw the racket down. It was against the rules. She got called out on it. Did she make hand signals with her coach on the sidelines? Most of the professional people that are involved in watching this type of sport and everything are saying, yes, she did do that. And that is, in a sense, cheating then, which is what she got called out for. Now, what I found really fascinating is the fact that you go into the press conference in this video where she talks about how the umpire is sexist. Well, tell me something. She played against another woman. So how was the umpire being sexist in this case? Had she been playing against against a male sports player, and called out on that, then maybe she could have claimed something about sexism. But in this case, there's no way that the umpire could have in any way been sexist at all. It just doesn't make sense. And everyone else keeps on pointing to the fact that, like I said, she was cheating, doing the hand signals and everything else. Did she throw a temper tantrum? Yes. She lost the game, lose with some dignity. She is considered by many one of the greats of athletes out there in modern history as far as top of their game, right? And she has a lot of people that are looking up to her, especially young girls and everything. And I don't think that we should put that much weight and water into these types of athletes and everything to look up to. I think that they're great as motivators for people to be within that realm of the sport and have something to aspire to that level of competitiveness and athleticism. But you can't... She really set herself apart here as someone that you shouldn't have your kids looking up to as far as moral character to follow if you're going to throw tantrums like this for getting called out on things that you actually did. It just doesn't make any sense. Do I have people that disagree? No. Okay. I did have a comment there, I thought. My sister got very excited with the Captain Marvel trailer because she was a manager for a very long time at Blockbuster Video. May it rest in peace. So here's something pretty interesting. I set out a poll about 2 weeks ago on September 10th. No, not 2 weeks ago. That was a week ago. Okay. I asked a very simple question that I said I would bring up in the podcast and relate back to everything that's been going on lately. The poll, in the poll, the question I had was this: in a hypothetical situation, I own a Christian clothing line and I hire you to be in charge of a design and marketing of that company. You coordinate an effort to put out a sweet design that implements the cross, but after a couple months, sales figures show it was a dud design. It's created a negative buzz, though, and a lot of people are saying that something in the design looks like a male sexual organ, and they were uncomfortable with the idea of buying it and wearing it. What do you do? Here were the two choices: redesign the shirt or keep marketing it as it is. We had some people voting on this. 94% said redesign the shirt, with 6% saying keep the marketing as it is. I don't know why they would say that. But then again, this feeds into exactly why I made this poll and having a problem with the keep the marketing the way it is. Here's how it all ties in. Marketing is trying to get an idea, whether it's tangible or intangible, out to people through a means of pushing it through advertising and marketing and everything, okay? So it's taking a product or a service and marketing it out there. In that same way, there's very little difference in the process, at least in terms of, not in terms of violence or standoffishness or anything, but there's not much difference between marketing and protesting for an idea that you believe in. To protest, you would have to do something to get your voice heard, to market your idea to people to buy into your idea. So in this case here, Christian clothing line, you have a good idea that you have going here, but it's taken the wrong way, and you have to either redesign that idea, that shirt in this case, or keep marketing it the way it is, even though it's failing miserably in the sales, okay? The way I apply this, and what I've been saying this whole time, is to the Colin Kaepernick situation, okay? Colin Kaepernick has a great topic that needs to be discussed in the public. But his way of marketing or protesting that topic is by kneeling for the national anthem and getting a bunch of other people to do it too. Is it taken wrong? Yes. In this case, what I compared this to was something in the design resembling a sexual organ or something like that. In this case, while he's kneeling for the flag in protest to police brutality against minorities in the U.S., the way that the public is actually seeing it is completely different. They're seeing it as disrespectful to the flag, our military, our police officers, and every other emergency responder and everything else that goes along with the idea of America. So I know people are going to disagree with me. I have a couple friends that would actually voted in this. One of my friends that voted in this said, redesign the shirt. He's the one that would tell you, this is the protest, it's working, keep on doing it the way it is, the way Kaepernick's doing it. And the reason why I did this the way that I did with this poll and the way I'm comparing it is because I think once you're so invested in an idea, whether you're on the side of Kaepernick or on the other side, you can't break through that wall anymore. There's no way you can have the people that are seeing this as a protest against our military and our flag to suddenly say, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this is about the police versus the minorities in this country, and we should just put all this behind us with the military and the flag and everything, and it's not disrespectful. And you're also not going to get the supporters of Kaepernick to say, you know what? I can understand this. They think that it's disrespectful to the flag. Maybe we need to figure out another way to do this protest that doesn't tie it in directly with that, and we can still get our message across. And that is exactly my point. People are no longer able to actually step back from the situation and analyze it and reconstruct what they're trying to do to get their message across properly. In this case here, Kaepernick and all the other football players that are kneeling for the anthem and in other sports and everything else where they're doing this, they need to take an opportunity to step back, realize that they're hurting their own industry. Ratings are down for the, second or third year in a row right now. And people are pissed off at what's going on. And it has nothing to do with people saying that they're upset that they're protesting police brutality. There's certainly a discussion that can be had there. There's always an opportunity for discussion, for bridging those gaps between opinions and ideas and coming together and trying to figure things out for the betterment of our society. But if you can't recognize that one side is saying one thing and the other side is saying something else, and you're completely missing each other here, there's no way for you to bridge that gap, because in essence, you're taking two different bridges into each area. You're just completely passing by each other and you're not going to meet at all. So as we go on from the Colin Kaepernick analogy here, we're going to take a look at a Fox News segment from the 5, where they're talking about Nike actually picking up Colin Kaepernick for their new spokesperson. If you haven't seen that ad, it says sacrifice something, even if it means losing everything or something like that. I'm not really sure. I think it's a poor ad. It's actually been doing pretty good back and forth. It certainly got a lot of attention and a lot of very funny memes. So let's take a look at what they had to say, because I think that there's some good points made for both sides here that we should have a discussion on. So let's take a look at what they had to say on the 5.
The controversial quarterback is featured in the ad with the message, quote, "Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything," end quote. The backlash is firing up social media, many calling for a company boycott, some burning Nike products, and the company losing $4.2 billion in market capital today. Jesse, what do you make of this?
I bet the NFL is not too happy that Nike just dropped this hand grenade right before the beginning of the season. And I don't think Colin Kaepernick's a hero to be promoted. I think the cops that he was mocking on his socks as pigs, those guys are the heroes. And the fact that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and John Brennan of the CIA came out in support of this guy makes me think I'm taking the right position. I know from NFL sources that the boycott here is going to be huge. They're very worried about this. People are sending sneakers back. They're burning stuff. This was not a very good PR move by Nike. There's a lot of better athletes to promote.
There's two ways this could have gone. They could have ran the numbers and said, okay, we're going to alienate this huge market share, and we're okay with that. We're just going to go after the part that agrees with us. Or they're in such a bubble that they didn't think this would be a problem, that they would be celebrated as heroes. Now, if being praised by Ahmadinejad is your version of getting a high five and the attaboy, go for it. But the good news is that this is America, and there are a number of other places where you can buy your shoes and your athletic apparel if you so choose to, based on their choice to elevate Colin Kaepernick, who has sacrificed nothing, by the way. He was offered multiple contracts with a number of teams. He has sacrificed nothing to get into the position he is now. Nike's been paying him since 2011 for doing these things. So through all of the kneeling and the disrespect and the pig socks. So the free market is a wonderful thing, and we'll see how this runs out for Nike. Today was not a good day for them.
I'm always curious. Well, hold on a second. I think people like Beto O'Rourke, the Senate candidate in Texas, have stood up and said that it's totally American to have protests in this country.
Yeah, so burning Nike shoes is American too.
And you have people. That's right. So
was he driving when he said that?
The people who are saying, "Oh, Colin Kaepernick shouldn't protest," they're protesting Nike.
Right.
So I mean, that seems hypocritical.
Not during the anthem.
Not during their job.
That's a great point, because some people view him as a hero. Some people view him as this horrible person who's anti-American. That's fine. People can have their opinion. But my question is, why pick somebody so controversial? I'm always curious when businesses have these decisions to make at these pivotal times. There's plenty of people that you could pick that haven't made, very distinct political or cultural statements that are divisive. Why run the risk that half of the people around the country that could potentially like or buy your product are going to be marginalized by this? Are they so confident that the half that agree with them outnumber the half that don't, that they would make a decision? And I can't for the life of me figure out, as a business decision, why you would go this risky route when there's an opportunity to not do that. And so many people have been on record, not just the President of the United States, but so many people have come out, former member of the armed forces have come out and said, this doesn't sit right with us, this statement by Colin Kaepernick of what he's been doing. So why go this route?
Well, I think he has fans. And Greg, what do you think?
I think for the media and for Nike, the story is not about the initial story. It's about the reaction to the story. They already knew what they were going to get, and they don't care about the other half. Nike understood it's about what's happening here at this table, because what they're getting is a buttload of free press without ever having to buy an ad. It's a great controversy. Nike's always been kind of controversial, and he might actually fit with their brand. But what it tells other people is, you're not my brand then, and I'm going to move on. But Nike doesn't care about us. They don't care about our viewers. All they care about is these stories, getting us mad. That's why I think the best response to this is 2 words. Who cares? I don't care. That's 3 words. I really don't care. That's 4 words. I really don't care. You can have him. And he's a winner. He just made millions.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about a capitalist.
But remember what Michael Jordan said, Republicans buy sneakers too.
Yeah, but I think that Nike is standing up for what they see as their values. And I remember they're the ones that pushed Michael Jordan, made Michael Jordan and Air Jordans into a national symbol. So let's watch. Next.
Okay, so a couple interesting things here. One of the main things that was pointed out over the last couple of weeks in regards to these people taking their Nike clothing and burning it is, how much of a caring person are you really to take that clothing and burn it when you could easily just take everything and donate it to a homeless shelter and actually help someone that actually needs clothes? That's a very good point, and I completely agree with it. Also, in regards to Greg Gutfeld's comment in talking about how Nike doesn't really care. It just doesn't matter to them. They knew that they were setting up something controversial here by picking Colin Kaepernick as their spokesperson, because any PR is good PR. It's an old saying in the advertising industry. It doesn't matter as long as it creates a buzz. They only have to pay for one initial ad. From there, it sparks multiple discussions across the board that will keep on going. I'm still talking about it right now. But Greg also makes another good point. Who cares? In the end, you sit here and you realize that day after day after day, you go onto social media and you see all these people posting things, whether they're for the left or for the right, and it's outrage. It's from a scale. There's no scale of 1 to 10 anymore. It's instantly a 10 or 11, and you're automatically outraged about a situation. We try to make light of things on this podcast because I'm so completely sick of being turned up to volume 11 all the time and outraged about everything. I need to laugh a little bit and get it out a little bit more. in regards to this, the funniest things to see were all the memes coming out and all the self-made photoshopped ads that were mocking Nike for, talking about the sacrificing and taking all these characters and everything across the board from different TV shows and other famous people. I know Tanya, what's the sniper? Tanya Kyle, Chris Kyle's wife, actually responded to this ad talking about Colin Kaepernick not sacrificing anything in compared to what the actual people sacrificed for their country, which a lot of people are seeing this Colin Kaepernick as offensive towards. When he's kneeling during the anthem, you see someone like Chris Kyle and what he sacrificed literally his life for, and you make that comparison. There really is no comparison. Now, an interesting thing about that is, I don't know if you've been seeing this in your news feeds, but I've had it happen at least twice to me now. Conservative articles that are posted, including Tanya Kyle's response to the Colin Kaepernick story, is immediately followed up by a Facebook-sponsored fact check right underneath that article for people to see if it was actually true or not. And both conservative articles that I saw these fact checks on actually did turn out to be true. And it seems like I'm not seeing any of this stuff, any of these Snopes fact checking for any of the liberal articles that my friends are posting that are completely outrageous and over the top in their outrage towards what's going on with things like Kavanaugh and everything else right now. Another interesting thing about Colin Kaepernick, it appears, rumors are saying that he may be going back into the NFL and to the Patriots is what they're saying right now. So yes, it's actually true. My producer doesn't like that one. She's a Patriots fan. So yes, the Patriots are looking at him, as well as another team. I forget exactly who it was, but if you know who it was, certainly make it known in the comments. Here's some other things, though. One of the other things that they brought up on the 5 is that Colin Kaepernick at one point in time on the field wore socks that featured pig faces with police hats all over them. Well, it gets a little worse than that, actually, because this, according to the Daily Mail, says Colin Kaepernick donated $25,000 to a group named after convicted cop killer and former Black Liberation Army member Assata Shakur, who broke out of jail and fled to Cuba. It says Colin Kaepernick's foundation made the donation to Assata's daughters in April. The Chicago-based charity is named in honor of cop killer Assata Shakur. Shakur was convicted in the 1973 shooting death of a New Jersey state trooper. The Black Liberation Army member escaped from prison and lives in Cuba. She was godmother to rapper Tupac Shakur, whose stepfather aided the escape. Charity is a collective of radical black women affiliated with Black Lives Matter. He's also been seen wearing, I'm having a heck of a time today, what's the Che Guevara shirt as well. So the guy is just, in my mind, not too bright. He's not a good football player, as despite what some people may say. Even when he wasn't causing controversy on the 49ers, he was still on the bench as a second string quarterback. So he is obviously not the top of the line in the NFL. So the Patriots will be taking a big step down. Isn't that right? Going with Kaepernick. Keeping with the entertainment news, this according to BuzzFeed, the headline says, horrify your friends with this sexy Handmaid's Tale Halloween costume. So if you're not familiar with the Handmaid's Tale TV show, apparently, I haven't even watched it myself. I've just heard little bits and pieces about what it is. It's supposed to be a big slam on Christianity. And I think Owen Benjamin put it best, the comedian, that it's about all these women who are oppressed and wearing garb from head to toe to hide themselves from their male counterparts and subjected to strict religious ideology and everything. And he thought, for a second there, I thought I was watching a show about radical Islam. So that was pretty good. But in this case here, It says that a company is making what they call a sexy Handmaid's Tale costume. It says the description reads, an upsetting dystopian future has emerged where women no longer have a say. However, we say be bold and speak your mind in this exclusive, brave, red maiden costume. The responses on Twitter have been puzzled, though. One person said, wait, is this sexy handmaid? This is so far from the point I can't even. Another person say, capitalism wins again. Dang right. Under his eye, am I down for happy hour? Great moments in self-satire. So obviously, in this case, everybody's alluding to the fact that this show, the point of the show is to completely cover up women with the attire. And in this case, they're taking that attire and slutting it up for Halloween and everything, which isn't that uncommon, for crying out loud. Every single thing that a woman wears in uniform has been turned into a sexy, slutty Halloween costume over the years. So it just makes sense that they would do something with this. And yes, that is capitalism. If people buy it, good for the company. Okay, going to 6ABC. This is one of my favorite ones. Keeping with keeping women down. The headline to this one says, some complain that the new iPhones are too big for the hands of women. In New York, Apple is facing backlash over its newly released iPhones, with some people complaining that the new devices are sexist. Some are taking to social media to voice their frustration, complaining they'll constantly be dropping their phone. Others say they're worried the big phones will strain their hands. And according to a 2015 study, the average man's hand is 1 inch larger than a woman's. 3 new iPhones are coming out this month and next. Apple XS has a bigger screen than the one on last year's dramatically designed remodel, the iPhone X, and it'll cost about $1,000. A bigger version will be called the iPhone XS Max, which looks to be about the size of the iPhone 8 Plus, though the screen size is much bigger. This one will cost almost $1,100, topping last year's iPhone X, which at $1,000 seemed jaw-dropping at the time. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. The headline says exactly what you need to going down into the opening paragraph and everything. Some complain iPhones are too big for the hands of women, and they are complaining that the devices are sexist. This coming from the same group of people that will tell you unequivocally there is no scientific difference between men and women at all anymore, and that men and women are equal across the board. There is no difference, but they're saying it's sexist because the women can't fit it in their hand. So you try to figure that one out. Okay, now I came across this one. I do have to admit this may be an old video because he's saying happy holidays and has some crazy candy cane things coming out of his helmet here, or hat. But I just thought it was funny. I thought you might enjoy it too. Here is a guy who made a video. He's also the one, yes, John Bucci. He's the guy who strapped a bunch of fireworks to his bare chest and lit them and to go off. It was the little firecrackers and everything, and had like major bad 3rd-degree burns to his chest and everything. Well, now he has a video out where he's taking a paintball gun and shooting it point blank at his face. So, for your entertainment purposes only, don't try this at home. Here you go.
Hi, boys and girls. I'm about to shoot this paintball gun point blank into my face. Happy holidays, and don't try this at home.
Oh, what the f***, dude? Let me see. Oh my god! You're missing a f***ing tooth, dude!
I don't even understand. That shouldn't even happen, dude.
You can always count on idiots for some quality, really bad entertainment. So he's thinking to himself, that shouldn't have even happened. You just shot something point blank into your mouth. What did you expect to happen? I mean, like my wife said, has this guy never been shot by a paintball before? It'll leave a welt on your skin for weeks. And he shot it point blank at his mouth. So of course it knocked his tooth loose. Goes along with the rest of his character for now, at least. So speaking of shooting things, this is one of my favorite articles from this week, actually a local one. Reading, Pennsylvania, a man is sentenced for shooting at imaginary clowns. It says in Reading, Pennsylvania, a man could spend years behind bars for shooting at imaginary clowns inside his home in Reading. Nathan Mathias was sentenced to between 22 and 60 months in prison after pleading guilty to discharge of a firearm into an occupied structure. He's 35 and fired a shotgun inside the home of the 1400 block of Birch Street on the morning of December 18th, 2016. This is a new story, though. That's weird. Mathias told RPD officers who responded to the scene that he was shooting at, quote, two small clowns who were running around his second floor apartment. At first they were curled up in a ball, but then they started to run around, so I tried to shoot at them. Sounds like... It's always these clowns. I tell you, it's always clowns. They always get to you. Police said that they searched the apartment and found no clowns, so he was safe, or evidence of anyone else having been there. They said that they did find Mathias to have an odor of alcohol on his breath and a bottle of vodka in his pocket. Asked by police if he had anything to drink, Mathias replied, "Only a sip." Maybe they should have checked his system for some other things as well on that case. Okay, speaking of people doing really stupid things, another one according to Fox. Where was this one? Bridgeport, Connecticut. A mother mistakes dynamite for a candle during a power outage. In Connecticut, authorities say a woman mistook a stick of dynamite for a candle during a power outage and suffered severe hand injuries. Hand injuries? First of all, what is anybody doing with a stick of dynamite in their freaking house? It doesn't make any sense. And just her hand? Wait to hear it. Actually, I can't believe it's just her hand that received injuries. It says Assistant Bridgeport Fire Chief Michael Calderani says the woman was looking to light a candle in her home at about 9:30 p.m. on Thursday after the power went out during a storm. The dynamite went off in the woman's hand. Got to keep the hand open. You should know that. One of her children called 911. She was taken to the hospital, but no one else was injured. Calderoni says one of the home's windows was blown out. They're lucky there's just hand injuries and a freaking window blown out, because that house could have just been completely demolished from this. They use that stuff to blow up mines, for crying out loud. Imagine if our previous guy there had been throwing sticks of dynamite in his apartment at the clowns. That would have been bad. Okay, let's go over to campus reform here. It says student council members are saying in one college at the University of Wisconsin in Madison that ice cream is not inclusive enough. Yes, we have to dig down that deep now. Imagine for a second that you live in a country where things are so good that the thing you want to complain about is ice cream. That's how good we have it right now, people. Thank you, Trump. Student council members at the University of Wisconsin-Madison are asking the school to change the ingredients in its official ice cream to be more inclusive. The students say that minority students of certain religious backgrounds cannot enjoy the ice cream, which contains beef gelatin, without violating their religious beliefs. Hey, producer, out loud, what could they do instead of eating that ice cream? Have another, buy something else, don't eat the ice cream? Is it a requirement that these people have to eat ice cream? No, actually there's other ice creams on campus that don't have the beef gelatin, so they could get those other ones, but this one's specific flavor is not being inclusive enough because it has beef gelatin in it. It says student council members at the University of Wisconsin are demanding the school change the ingredients in the official university ice cream. It's the official one. You can't have the kids not eating the official ice cream, claiming that the current ingredients are discriminatory towards some minority students. The official ice cream, the Babcock, I don't know what that is, contains a beef gelatin additive which, according to the legislation, renders certain communities such as the Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, and vegetarian unable to enjoy it without violating their beliefs. Well, you're kind of violating your body's integrity by eating ice cream anyway, but we all do it. It says the legislation titled Ice Cream for All already has 8 sponsors, including the chair, vice chair, and secretary of the Associated Students of Madison Student Council. The ASM Student Council is comparable to a student government senate. The Ice Cream for All legislation will be voted on next Wednesday, which actually probably happened this Wednesday. So there may be an update to that. No, it is next Wednesday. Okay. So in this case here, we're talking about a flavor of ice cream that no one has to buy, no one is forcing them to eat, yet these people are completely offended that the ice cream flavor is not inclusive enough because it contains something that certain people can't eat. Well, you know what? That it is the way it is. We have friends that have family members that are allergic to everything under the sun. They might as well just eat water and frozen water, for crying out loud. But they don't complain about what they can or can't eat or anything like that. They know the circumstances and they adjust their lifestyle accordingly. You don't have to buy anything that you don't want or can't handle or whatever it is. I don't know. Last week was, what is today's date? Yeah, last week was 9/11. Kind of sorry that I missed the podcast on that week because 9/11 has really been one of the main things that shaped my life politically with everything. And it just made me realize, I think I lived in my own head as that our country was so shut off and every other country was its own thing, and we didn't really have that much going on with each other, and we were disconnected. And 9/11 really brought this feeling to me that the world is so much smaller than what you think it is, and everything's interconnected, and that you're not safe in your daily things, that you always need to keep a guard up and you need to be aware of your surroundings and aware of what's going on in the world and everything. And it really shaped everything that came into me politically on where I stand on issues and made me think during that incident. And now we have kids that are graduating and voting that don't even have a connection to 9/11 and where they were or what was happening or the emotions that they went through at the time. And to see some of the footage, every year it seems like more and more footage is released that wasn't seen in years past because it was so dramatic, or the phone calls coming from loved ones on the planes to their family members saying that they love them, they know that they're going to die, tell so-and-so that I love them as well. One person saying we're going to try to take back the plane that went over and crashed in Pennsylvania. It's just amazing to hear those things, and I had a very emotional day on 9/11, listening and watching all these videos and everything, that you have to go back to that time and place of, you know, what was happening in your life at that point in time, because the world stopped. There were countries around the world that were holding vigils for our New York City and our country and everything. People that you didn't feel like they really did care at all, and then all of a sudden you're seeing candlelight vigils all over the world for the people that were lost in the towers and everything. And if you were living at that time, you didn't have social media, you didn't have like smartphones or anything like that. I remember getting a call from my dad on my flip phone, and I was down in Philadelphia going to college at the time. I was a freshman, and here I left class after school was canceled for the day because the first tower was hit. I got back to my apartment in time to watch the news and see the second one hit, when everything just went for a whirlwind, because then we realized it wasn't just an accident. Then all of a sudden we're hearing about something happening to the Pentagon below us. So the New York was above me, Washington's below me, and then something happened out in western Pennsylvania, which was to the west of me. And it seemed like I was in this death zone at the time. And even though I was outside the Philadelphia city, I remember my dad calling me and saying to me, I don't care what's going on down there with the school, get home right now, get on the turnpike, take back roads, whatever you have to do, get out of the city, because I don't know what's going on. And it was a frantic time to be living in and go through that emotional roller coaster. But I think that in regards to a story like the one we're about to go over, this type of history is trying to be rewritten, because we went from a time where you knew who the enemy was and you could point to them, right? I think it was really wrong and is wrong for a lot of people to say that Muslims are the problem with this, because it's sections of that. That's like blaming Christians for the whole Christian group for what the Westboro Baptists do. It's this radical Islam that's a section of Muslims that do this. And even though they follow the same book, there's a lot of things that go into a very big discussion on that and everything. I have at least one Muslim friend. It doesn't put me up on a pedestal or anything, but he's a very peaceful man and a very family-friendly man, and would have done anything for me at the time as a friend. And it was a really awesome guy that I worked with. He was actually one of my managers at one point. And I think there's this disconnect between the two groups. But at the time during 9/11, we knew who the enemy was, and we were going after those enemies across the seas and everything, and going after them militarily. And we went within a very short period of time, because it really wasn't that long ago, from being able to identify those people to being shamed for profiling people at the airport, of people that obviously are more than likely than grandma in a wheelchair to be a threat on a flight, to now not even being allowed to say anything about Muslims or radical Islam or anything like that. And in a sense, turning that victimhood mentality around and saying that they're the victims in this whole thing, and turning it back on just comparing those two victimhood mentalities against each other. It's gotten absolutely crazy. The whole society that we live in right now, and culture now revolves, not just in this case, but in most cases, around this victimhood. You have to be the victim of something. Every day you're looking to be offended by something. You're looking to be the offended and as the victim of something, and then you revolve your personality around that. And it's just it's that outrage that I was talking about earlier, about just letting it boil up and trying to find the most minute things to be just so angry about and hateful towards your brothers and sisters in your community, and taking it out on them for having a difference of opinion over the smallest things, when you could really stand back and say, what's the point? You know, I personally have talked about it in the past, my experience with cancer and everything, and even family members that I live with will get upset about little things sometimes that I just can't find the energy to get upset over, when I know sitting on my deathbed at one point in time, it's not worth getting that upset over. You need to let go of the outrage, because there's so much more to life to be concerned about and to enjoy, and to have faith in God in, which is really what that experience brought out of me, is that there's little time that you have here to be outraged about things. But in this case, this is pretty interesting. Going back on 9/11, a lot of schools probably at least did a cursory examination of what happened on that day and the circumstances surrounding it. In this case, though, the teacher decided to omit what happened on 9/11 and instead do that switch around on victimhood and teach a lesson on something else. So let's take a look at this. This is according to the New Jersey Herald. Herald. It says, on day of mourning for the 3,000 people killed on September 11, 2001 by Islamic terrorists. Wow, he actually called it out there. Inspired by Osama bin Laden, a middle school social studies teacher, now they should be ashamed of themselves for this if you're a social studies teacher, allegedly decided to skip that part of the discussion on Tuesday and instead teach a fictionalized account of a Muslim boy being picked on because his name is Osama. School officials thus far have been mostly mum on the matter, beyond acknowledging that it was brought to their attention and dealt with internally. But one couple told the New Jersey Herald Wednesday that they are outraged. Of course, there's that word, outrage, and have since had their daughter pulled out of that teacher's class. Well, good. Take some action. That's exactly what I would actually encourage you to do. Here's the reason, or at least why they have such a knowledge of this type of thing. Ed O'Rourke, a former Marine, said that he and his wife Jody found out about it almost by accident while having dinner with their daughter, who is in 6th grade, Tuesday evening. I thought it was a joke at first, O'Rourke said. I couldn't believe it. The story that the teacher had her students read, titled "My Name is Osama," tells a made-up account of an Iraqi immigrant boy named Osama who faces taunts of terrorists in school by several students who tell him his mother, who wears a hijab, has a bag on her head. After pushing back against his tormentors, the boy is suspended from school for fighting. So here is, I couldn't have said it any better myself, so I'll just say exactly what the father said. It would be like, on a day about the Holocaust, doing a made-up lesson about a boy named Adolf being bullied by Jewish kids and saying we shouldn't blame all Germans, or don't pick on the poor kid named Adolf or on the Jewish holidays, O'Rourke said. It's grotesque. So the question here is this. It seems like an effort was made by this teacher to completely rewrite the history of that day to focus instead on a Muslim boy who is being tormented for having the Osama name, which happens to be the name of the main terrorist organizer of the whole attack and everything, and focusing the energy on that instead of actually taking the opportunity to focus on what happened in your own country. You're in 6th grade. This was way before your time at this point, and you have no idea what was going on. Now, I think 6th grade is actually probably right around the perfect age to start showing some of that material to show what happened in his country. We've talked about it before, the news cycle changed. We went from a morning, noon, and evening newscast to 24-hour news cycles with all these networks competing against each other after that day, because it's just like, okay, people are that interested in the news and we have to keep on going. We dropped all these major stories, and it was that focus for so long after that. But for this teacher to take a 9/11 that day and completely reverse the story to instead focus on what she did and take the attention away from what actually happened in our country, a historical lesson for a social studies teacher, to me, just another one of the reasons why we homeschool. I keep on saying it. Yeah, Gary's on. He usually gets involved in the podcast here. It says, shout out to today's date. It's my birthday. 9/11, such an eye-opener. Even still, seeing the interviews of people who had no idea what happened on 9/11 was disgusting and legit made me want to puke. Happy birthday, Gary. I did send you a Facebook message, but yeah, certainly happy birthday, and keep up the good work. Very good brother-in-law there. Okay, here's, let's keep with the education field at least. This according to the Daily Mail. Top-level sources at the Daily Mail that have been infected with insecticide and lanternflies were distributing this, and it's turned the frogs gay again. No, this is in regards to a cheerleader in uniform pummels and body slams like straight up wrestling style a girl who punched her in the face after the athlete repeatedly said she did not want to get into a physical altercation. I have video. Let's take a look.
Touch me. Ooh! Nobody wants. Ooh!
Goddamn! Hey, get on him! Get on him! Oh, she get on him! Break it up! Break the shit up! Get around! Come on, here we go! Got your ass beat, Joe!
I just wanted to show the video. It's nothing special. Nothing big happened there. It's a pretty good fight, though. And that cheerleader, oh, that was a body slam. That was pretty amazing. Here's what I would tell you. Here's something that's not PC, that you're not going to hear from anyone, that my parents would have told me, except I don't remember them telling me this. I like the saying that you say to your child, listen, be a peacekeeper, you know? Don't be the one to start a fight. But if someone starts a fight, you end that fight. And that's exactly what this cheerleader did. She sat there and took it, tried to calmly explain. There's actually more video to that prior to the fight, prior to her actually getting punched in the face. She's like, hey, listen, no one's trying to talk to you or do these things. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And all of a sudden, the girl punches her in the face. This girl gets up and starts wailing on her. Hey, listen, you can only sit there and take it for so long. You poke that tiger too many times, you're gonna get clawed. So good for her. And it would have been the other way around too if it was the cheerleader picking on her. All right, what do we got here? Okay. Oh, you know what? This kind of falls within politics and entertainment. The headline on IJR says, Buzz Aldrin salutes the flag while slamming First Man movie, proud to be an American. So the new film created to honor the life of Neil Armstrong and the historic landing on the moon omitted the American flag planting, creating controversy. And Apollo 11 astronaut Edwin Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk the moon, took a swipe at the First Man movie. Aldrin posted the historic photos of the American flag being planted on the moon alongside his crewmate Neil Armstrong, adding the hashtag proud to be an American. He also retweeted a photo of himself. And here's the controversy on this. It says, actor Ryan Gosling, who plays the lead role of Armstrong, defended the movie's decision omitting the flag. He's Canadian, saying at opening night at the Venice Film Festival, I think this was widely regarded in the end as a human achievement, and that's how we chose to view it. I forgot to download this video for you. It was not viewed as a human achievement specifically, generally, yes. Specifically, this was an American achievement. And the reason I say that, and I'll throw this into the final podcast, is President JFK at the time made it his personal mission to land an American on the moon and plant the flag to show that we will not be overpowered in any race in regards to being able to accomplish things. And his speech laid it out fantastically. And in that speech, John F. Kennedy said, we are going to the moon and we are going there for American accomplishment and achievement. And he laid it all out. That is exactly what it was.
These are extraordinary times, and we face an extraordinary challenge. Our strength as well as our convictions have imposed upon this nation the role of leader in freedom's cause. Now going on around the world between freedom and tyranny, the dramatic achievements in space which occurred in recent weeks should have made clear to us all, as did the Sputnik in 1957, the impact of this adventure on the minds of men everywhere who are attempting to make a determination of which road they should take. Since early in my term, our efforts in space have been under review. With the advice of the Vice President, who is Chairman of the National Space Council, we have examined where we are strong and where we are not, where we may succeed and where we may not. Now it is time to take longer strides. Time for a great new American enterprise. Time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth.
So for Ryan Gosling, a Canadian, to take up the mantle on what it meant for the American flag to be planted there, I gotta tell you, the trailer for this movie looks amazing. This is something I would love to see in IMAX, but I won't. There's no way at this point, because of what they are choosing to do, that I am going to throw any amount of money, of my personal money, towards this movie to promote this PC culture of possibly offending people that aren't Americans because they weren't the ones that landed on the moon. If that's the case, push for a space program in your country where that you can land on the moon. The other thing that comes into this is actually this mentality that you have to cater to the Chinese audience when it comes to making movies. That if you were to plant an American flag in the movie, it would offend the Chinese audience, where you have a very large second coming of gross intake for the movie industry for any of the films that are released. So it's my understanding that they just didn't want to offend the Chinese audience and chose to omit it so that they could make more money. Well, at this point, I think that you are actually hurting yourself more now by omitting putting the planting of the flag into the movie than had you actually put it in and allowed the Chinese people to see it. Because you know what? It's historical fact. If otherwise, what are you trying to say? Is this a nonfiction on what happened with Neil Armstrong? Is this just a made-up story? Are we going to see the Dark Side of the Moon Transformers pop out of nowhere on this or something like that? Independence Day sequel, maybe, the ship flying in and Will Smith coming to the rescue for Ryan Gosling's character. If you're trying to go here for historical fact, then follow through with it and show what actually happened. And historical fact shouldn't offend anyone. There's offensive things that have happened throughout history. There's movies that were done on slavery in America and everything. But you know what? No one chose to omit the fact that they were under plantation owner whips and chains and everything else because it might offend southern plantation owners today. It just doesn't make sense. You want to put as much historical fact in there as possible to show exactly what happened. And this was an accomplishment, not something that would be demonized today. So it just doesn't make any sense. My recommendation, not a protest, not a boycott of this film. I'm just not going to be putting any of my money towards it. You decide on how you want to go ahead and do that as well. But certainly, if you're watching right now, comment and let me know what you feel you're going to be doing in regards to that movie if you're a movie fan like I am. Okay, this according to AmericanGG.net says dead criminal's family complains that the victim's AR-15 made the fight unfair. Should be an interesting article, right? In case you haven't already heard, a 23-year-old man from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma made headlines last year when he shot and killed 3 teenage home invaders. The 3 teens had robbed the garage earlier that day, then returned to try the main house. They awoke Zach Peters, a homeowner's son, who grabbed his AR-15 and defended himself against 3 armed and masked intruders. Max Cook, who was 19, Jacob Redfern, who was 17, and Jake Woodruff, who was 16, were shot and killed. Authorities have announced today that Zach Peters will not face any charges, thank God. Elizabeth Rodriguez, a 21-year-old ringleader, getaway driver, and Cook's girlfriend, has been formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of burglary. Her murder charges come from the felony murder law, which charges anyone involved in a felony with murder if a death occurs during the felonious act. I almost said fallacious there. That would have been a completely different story. Police investigation has discovered that the 4 burglars robbed the same house earlier that morning During the first robbery, they broke into the garage, as I said. In the video that was obtained by Wagner County Sheriff Chris Elliott and Assistant DA Jack Thorpe, it updated the media on the home invasion. Now the family of one of the deceased criminals is complaining they don't believe it was fair that Peters was allowed to defend himself with an AR-15 when the criminals were only armed with knives and brass knuckles. Let me ask you something. Let's go with the simplest of these items. Could you kill someone with brass knuckles? Yes, you could bludgeon someone to death by getting on top of them and beating the ever-living crap out of them, okay? Knives, certainly. Obviously, you can kill someone with a knife, okay? So to say that a teenager shouldn't have been able to protect himself against 3 people that any one of these could have, on their own, killed this kid with one of the weapons that they were carrying, let alone 3 of them. He was outnumbered, okay? So it just blows my mind. This is not the first time that I've seen a criminal's family member say that they shouldn't have been shot because they weren't armed, or they weren't a threat, or it was an unfair situation due to weapons or something. What they're essentially saying to you is, listen, if someone breaks into your home, climbs in your window at night or something like that, and you're in bed, get up, turn on the lights, cordially greet them, sit them down, make a pot of tea, see what their intentions are for you and the household. And at that point, if it's unfair of a fight, like they have a gun or something, then maybe you can retreat back into another portion of your home, retrieve the firearm, and then fire upon them. Completely ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. If you are a silhouette in my window and that window starts to come up, you're going to get popped in the head. All right, you stick a finger into my house while everyone's sleeping, or try to break in or rob me of something, you're going to get your head blown off, all right? There's nothing else to it. You are a criminal, and you will be treated like a criminal. But again, if you feel differently, comment. I expected some more from Gary here, at least. By the way, Gary is one of the fighters in a group of people out in Colorado right now, where they are tackling gun issues out there in a group on Facebook. I follow along. He invited me into that, and it's a very fascinating thing because it's something that needs to be done with our Second Amendment being attacked all the time. I know Gary likes my political cup, but it is football season, so I'm going with the old school retro throwback of the Eagles. Okay. This, according to 69 News, which is a local affiliate here in news affiliate here in Lehigh Valley area. It says HealthBeat, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, rates of 3 STDs in the U.S. reach record high. Rates of syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia have climbed for the 4th consecutive year in the United States, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Last year, nearly 2.3 million U.S. cases of these sexually transmitted diseases were diagnosed, according to preliminary data. That's the highest number ever reported nationwide, breaking the record set in 2016 by more than 200,000 cases. It is time that President Trump and Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar declare STDs in America a public health crisis. This is according to David Harvey, Executive Director of the National Coalition of STD Directors. Ooh, I don't know. That's not a title I want on my business card, to be honest with you. What goes along with that is emergency access to public health funding to make a dent in these STD rates and to bring these rates down and to ensure that all Americans get access to health care that they need. Rob Stephenson, a professor and director of the Center for Sexuality and Health Disparities at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, said that it's not a surprising trend. I think over the last 5 years, we've seen a rapid increase in the prevalence of sexually transmitted infections in the U.S., and we're also starting to see a plateau in our fight against the HIV epidemic as well. So, it goes on and on to explain what's been going on in the United States and everything. But here's my point and why I bring this up. The left in this country has it out against the right and the right's idea on sex and intercourse in America. We're going to hit that topic. Let's do it. Let's go deep on the topic. You know what I'm saying? So she said. But the fact is, conservatives, the religious right, even the religious left in a lot of cases as well, say that you should abstain from sexual intercourse until you're married. This would hedge off a lot of different situations that include things like you feeling you need to get an abortion, which you don't need to do, except for the very rare 0.01% case that it's the harm of the health of the mother, in which case some people have decided to forego that as well and risk their own health, because a lot of times they're wrong on that. Doctors are wrong sometimes. Go figure. It would hedge off things like abortion. It would definitely hedge off things like sexually transmitted diseases. If you both abstain from sexual intercourse until you get married, neither one of you have that, barring an extreme example where a person is born with some sort of disease from their mother or something like that. There is one, hepatitis or something like that. But these things can be hedged off and whittled down and treated over the course of time if people were just more sexually responsible with their lives. Instead, what we have is a section of culture, and a very large section of culture at this point, that tells you, who cares? Sex doesn't have any meaning. There shouldn't be love tied to sex anymore. It's a fun activity. It makes you feel good, and if it makes you feel good, go ahead and do it. And if you get a sexually transmitted disease, you could be open with the next person that you sleep with, or you could not be. And if they get it, and it spreads and spreads. This is a recurrence of the type of mentality of the sexual revolution of the hippies of the 60s and 70s, and where an explosion in STDs happened throughout those decades because of that sexual revolution. We need to get back to a point of responsible sexual intercourse for teaching this to kids and saying, listen, the reason why this is prevalent is because we have a section of our culture that promotes sexual activity to people as a recreational sport. No one cares anymore. No one cares what it's tied to or what happens or anything else. And we've gotten to a really bad point where STDs are skyrocketing to record highs now because of the mentality that we have in this country. And it just doesn't make sense, because this stuff can all be easily controlled if we were just all a little bit more responsible. Even if you want to step outside that box of abstinence, like I say, and talk about just responsible birth control, condoms and contraceptives and everything else that go into it, or over it. You know what I'm saying? That's what she said. Again, just responsibility. That's all we're trying to say here. Chris Peranto. If you don't know that name, you should. I should have tied this to the 9/11 story with the teacher. You know, on 9/11, 2012, there was another incident, and it was a direct response to what happened on 9/11 as a kind of, you better remember us type thing. We had some people in Benghazi, and we've speculated over the last 2 years now that the reason why we had our people over there was part of a gun running operation under the Obama administration that was discovered. And we also had a U.S. diplomat over there, Chris Stevens at the time, and things went to hell. Our secure location, not the U.S. embassy, as a lot of people in the media tried to portray this at first. There was a U.S. embassy and there was a CIA annex like a mile or two away that was unknown to people, okay? This was a secret operation happening at an undisclosed location, but the U.S. embassy was something else. The U.S. Embassy was attacked. Chris Stevens was killed. And then the attack easily went to the CIA annex, because it would appear that the gun running operation, those that were involved on the other side of the deal, knew where that was and had that intention all along and turned around on them. If you remember correctly, the left, who loves to idolize Barack Obama, President Obama at the time, who says that he's anti-Second Amendment, anti-weapons and everything else, even though he was involved in Operation Fast and Furious with a gun running into Mexico, and also these high-grade weapons over in Syria, in the Benghazi situation. What you had was, shortly after the attack on this, lying from the administration, where they were saying that it was a response to a video done by a Jewish person doing a video about saying offensive things about Muslims or something like that. Immediately, Obama tried to bypass Congress to facilitate the precise missile attacks on certain military structures in the Middle East to wipe out what they thought was these areas where the people that attacked the annex and the embassy came from. So now, if you're really connecting the dots here, because the media refuses to do it, what I believe happened, and I'm just saying I believe that this happened, is that there was a deal set up. Instead of paying for the weapons, they decided to attack and kill everyone, just take the weapons. They took the weapons back to these locations. Specifically, these locations were then touted by Obama to bypass Congress and directly strike them to wipe out all evidence of what we were doing over there in the first place. Because you can't have a extreme liberal president who talks about being anti-weaponry being caught doing weapon running in a situation like the Middle East. So he was trying to wipe out the evidence, and thank God our Congress stopped him from doing that. But Obama at the time kept on pressing and moving this red line with Syria. Oh, they better not pass this red line here, and they would pass it, and he would draw a new red line and everything else. It's a mess. Chris Paronto, in this case, is one of the Navy SEALs that went into the situation to help the people in the CIA annex escape, and it was him and like 5 other people on the top of the roof of this compound in Benghazi that held off wave after wave of terrorists that were launching mortars on them. They had these, I forget what the exact weapon is called, but it's this box that you can shoot a green laser out of and call for an overhead airstrike on certain areas that pinpoint where that green laser is pointing. They were up there saying, we have these targets painted, bomb them. We are under attack here. We're being killed and we need help. We're surrounded on all sides. We can't get out of here. We were within 3 hours of getting there from multiple bases around the world, including one in Italy, and from top level decision makers in the State Department, which was at the time run by Hillary Clinton. The people stood outside of their aircrafts and were told to stand down until further orders. And after call after call after call from our Navy SEALs and our men that were over there dying, they were told to stand down. And instead of being able to get there to them in 3 hours, this onslaught went on for 13 hours. We could have been there 3 times over from multiple bases helping these guys out, and instead our government refused to do anything for these guys. And eventually they were rescued by people over there. And we even refused to fly the soldiers home. They were actually flown home by someone else, I believe. It was just ridiculous. That all happened on 9/11 as a reminder to us of who these people actually are. Let's see here. Okay, they're talking about some other things. Okay, in this case, Chris Paronto temporarily was suspended from Twitter after calling out Obama's lie. So obviously the guy that refused to acknowledge and send help to save this guy called out President Obama, rightfully so, and was suspended on Twitter. It says this weekend, which was back on September 9th, former President Barack Obama called Benghazi a conspiracy theory. The audience lapped it up. One of the Benghazi heroes, Chris Paronto, responded indelicately, asking Obama to put himself in the position of the heroes that night. Right after that, he was suspended for 12 hours, but it's not clear if that is the reason or stated reason, which is different. Obama is rewriting history again. This is all according to the Independent Sentinel. So Chris Paronto's tweet specifically said, Benghazi is a conspiracy. Let's start over again. Benghazi is a conspiracy, Barack Obama. How about we do this? Let's put your cowardly ass on the top of a roof with 6 of your buddies and shoot RPGs and AK-47s at you while terrorists lob 81mm mortars, killing 2 of your buddies, all while waiting for U.S. support that you never sent. Hashtag scum. If there's one thing that I hope that the Obama administration is remembered for and should be remembered for, because it's not. It's what happened in Benghazi was a direct result of the inaction and cowardice of the Obama administration and the Clinton run Department of Defense, basically, Secretary of State, I don't know, whatever she was. State Department, there we go. I get those mixed up. So he also tweeted, so this is what happens when you call out a leftist group with TDS for being idiots and they cry to Twitter police who never censors. Yeah, so of course Obama won't respond to him at all either, though. What do we got here? Okay, so let's go back. I said I would respond to your comments. Gary said, sorry for the delay. I couldn't believe that argument. AR wasn't fair. It's almost beyond rebuttal. So, okay, so we need to arm ourselves similarly to the enemy or worse, else it's unfair. First of all, I'd rather have better guns than my enemy. Second of all, it isn't the left's main argument against the tyrannical government stance on the Second Amendment that you'll never be able to fight the U.S. military. May as well roll over and give them all up, please. Or as he said, police. Sue Myers goes back to the STDs and says STDs can easily be solved being monogamous or abstinence. There is a reason for these practices. Absolutely. Gary also posted an article here. It says double murder, children suicide, mental sadness, I couldn't read it there. But if you're watching the video, you can actually go and watch that as well. Okay, let's get into a little bit more on the politics end here. This according to the Blaze, top officials at the Blaze. Town is hit with significant economic hardship after the Red Hen restaurant booted Sarah Sanders. Now, if you're not familiar with this story, I don't even know if we actually covered it because, again, why get outraged over stupid things? In this case, it's an interesting scenario. There have been multiple stories that I've posted over the last couple of weeks in regards to denying service to people that I would personally support and saying, listen, if you're going to be consistent in that a baker should not have to bake a cake for something that they feel they would be participating in a sin with, then anybody should be able to turn down and refuse service. In this case, this Red Hen restaurant, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is the press secretary for President Trump, went in there and was refused service by the owner and shamed out of the restaurant. Shame. And she, I guess, apparently tried walking across the street to another restaurant to get served. And the owner of this restaurant, or people from this restaurant, followed Sarah Huckabee Sanders out of that restaurant and continued to antagonize her just because she's a press secretary. Now, this Red Hen restaurant, which is in Lexington, Virginia, says, remember the Red Hen restaurant in Lexington, Virginia, whose liberal owner booted White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders while she dined there? The controversial decision, which ignited a firestorm of controversy on social media, has had a drastic effect on the local community in Lexington. It's been so bad, in fact, that a regional tourism board has been forced to dip into emergency funds to cover for a significant tourism downturn. So, decisions have consequences, okay? That goes for the baker that decides to not bake a cake for a gay wedding as well. Your decision not to do that shouldn't result in a lawsuit in my mind, but there's a very strong likelihood that if you do this, you're going to have negative reviews, people are going to talk, and people are not going to come to your business because you chose not to do that. Now, in this case, with Christians that support the baker that doesn't bake the gay cake, you may also have a new set of customers that come in to try and support you. These are all free market decisions that people have to make. In this case, the Red Hen restaurant in Lexington, Virginia, made a choice, and now they have to live with the consequences. Unfortunately, it's the whole area that's now dealing with the consequences of what this owner did with their business by kicking out Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Now the whole town is in shambles financially because of what this restaurant owner did. And you just have to play things out in your mind anymore, because if this had happened, let's say 11 years ago, okay, and you were at a restaurant and someone didn't like what happened or anything like that, your only way of doing something would be to go to the press, who probably wouldn't cover it because they wouldn't care about such a small story, or you would do word by mouth or negative reviews, or take out an ad in a paper or something like that. That's a newspaper. Those are things that they used to print news on. It was our first means of media in this country, a printing press, for those of you that get everything off of Facebook. But it's just interesting that now something goes bad, and we've seen time after time on the podcast here, what we've gone over is an immediate outrage, obviously level 11, like we were talking about before, instant posting to social media to shame said person or company or product or anything like that, into submission, into reacting in some sort of way, whether that's shaming them so that they lose business, shaming them into a lawsuit, shaming them into a confrontation of sorts as well. And it's just instant anymore. And what happens is the outrage is a extreme wildfire. It just burns drastically for a very short period of time, and then it fizzles out, and no one remembers it. No one remembers what's going on with it. But what's left is the wreckage of this person's life who just had a difference of opinion. In this case here, it's a very weird situation, because did the Red Hen restaurant owner have the right to kick out Sarah Huckabee Sanders? Yes. I would support that person's right to kick her out. I think it's stupid. Had she asked them to participate in something that they didn't want to because it went against any of their beliefs, and in my mind, liberals don't really have beliefs or a code that they live by or principles. But in this case here, the only thing that was the wrong situation or participation in this situation is, listen, if you don't want to serve someone, kick them out. Go ahead. That's fine. I can find somewhere else to eat. If someone were to recognize me just because of my little podcast here or something, and they said, listen, I've seen your podcast. I don't agree with you politically. Get out of this restaurant. I'd be happy to get out of that restaurant. I don't know what they're going to do to my food back there. I've seen waiting. I've worked in the restaurant industry for a long time. I know that they could do something to my food. Why would I want to stay in a situation where you could potentially screw up what I'm about to ingest into my body? If you don't feel like you want me as a customer in your restaurant, goodbye. I will gladly leave there immediately and go find another restaurant to eat at that will gladly accept my monetary contribution to their services. In this case, though, what did the person do wrong? That was the owner of this business. They followed them out. They tried to shame her beyond the doors of the restaurant. That's overboard. And that's seemingly where the left has gone nowadays with their protests and Antifa and everything else, is just taking it to, we're talking about outrage 11, taking it to 20, 21. Like it's not over until you completely destroy this person's life. And what satisfaction do you get out of that? It's a temporary satisfaction that you acted out on your outrage and feel emotionally superior, morally and emotionally superior to the person that you were attacking. Where does that get you in life? I know that Xbox has achievement points and everything, but I don't see those little achievement trackers popping up over your head after you shame someone into submission. You're getting nowhere, and in the end, you're just an a-hole who doesn't know how to properly treat people in a civilized way. You, in the end, look like a dirtbag in society. So that's what happens in the town of the one that had the red hen that kicked out Sarah Huckabee Sanders. We're getting our stories mixed up here. I don't have a co-host to banter with. He sees the empty space. He's watching right now. He's a jerk. He wanted to go to Jersey. Nothing good ever happens in Jersey. Okay, according to the Daily Wire, David Hogg, our little favorite guy, drives us up a wall all the time, makes a fool of himself in Canada and gets his mic taken away. Left-wing activist David Hogg made a fool of himself in Canada late last week while joining leftist Michael Moore for the premiere of his anti-Trump propaganda film Fahrenheit 11/9. Appearing on stage with Moore at the Toronto International Film Festival, Hogg spoke to the Canadian crowd about saving America and turning their shame into votes. I have a question for you guys. Who's ready to save America? Who's ready to make America the country we say it is on paper and make it the actual country that it wants to be? He said to the Canadian crowd, I think the most important thing to realize, however, is the problems we face as a country, whether it be water in Flint, Michigan, or the amount of mass incarceration of people of color that can't vote. Hogg continued by suggesting that Canadians can donate money to political campaigns in the United States, which is a felony. After making the embarrassing remarks, Michael Moore took the microphone away from Hogg. Nearly 10 minutes later, Hogg was briefly allowed to speak again. He called out to the IRS, which he hoped was watching him speak, and asked them to investigate President Donald Trump for getting $30 million from Russia via the NRA. Which, here, actually, it says it right here. I was going to say it's not illegal. The truth is, the NRA allegedly received $2,500 from a few people with Russian addresses over the course of a couple years. Even CNN reports that it's not illegal for the NRA to accept contributions from foreign donors unless it were to use that money for electioneering purposes. So essentially, Canadian dollars going to political funding, felony. Russian dollars going towards an organization that gets involved in politics sometimes, but is there mainly to focus on the protecting of our Second Amendment right, not a felony. So, you gotta love David Hogg and his shenanigans. Speaking of David Hogg comes from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School down in Parkland, Florida, where he made his name, and with a school shooting that happened there, and him and a couple other, the five or whatever, 4 students, I forget exactly what it was, have been going around doing a tour to try and raise awareness against guns, for gun control and everything else. But NPR. Now, if you're not politically savvy on where certain sites or news sources or anything fall politically on the spectrum, NPR, if you're looking at the left right here, is about over here, okay? And if you're watching, that's here to over here. But they are far left when it comes to their news reporting and everything. Plus, their people make you want to go to sleep. They talk without any inflection or emotion in their voices, and they're horrible at jokes. But this is according to NPR. The headline is "The School Shootings That Weren't." And I think that this article is going to haunt gun control advocates for a very long time to come. How many times per year does a gun go off in an American school? We should know, but we don't. This spring, the U.S. Education Department reported that in the 2015 to 2016 school year, nearly 240 schools reported at least one incident involving a school-related shooting. The number is far higher than most other estimates. But NPR reached out to every one of those schools repeatedly over the course of 3 months and found that more than 2/3 of these reported incidents never happened. Child Trends, a nonpartisan, nonprofit research organization, assisted NPR in analyzing data from the government's civil rights data collection. We were able to confirm that just 11 reported incidents, either directly with schools or through media reports. In 161 cases, schools or districts attested that no incident took place or couldn't confirm one. In at least 4 cases, we found something did happen, but it didn't meet the government's parameters for a shooting. About a quarter of schools didn't respond to our inquiries. When we're talking about such an important and rare event, this amount of data error could be very meaningful, says Deborah Temkin, who is a research and program director at Child Trends. The Education Department asked for comment on our reporting, noted that it relies on school districts to provide accurate information in the survey responses, and it says it will now update some of these data later this fall, but officials added the department has no plans to republish the existing publication. No, how hard it would be extremely hard to just edit some content and throw it out on the internet for people to read, right? This confusion comes at a time when when the need for clear data on school violence has never been more pressing. Students around the country are heading back to school this month under a cloud of fear stemming from the most recent mass shootings in Parkland, Florida, and Santa Fe, Texas. At least 53 new school safety laws were passed in the states in 2018. Districts are spending millions of dollars to harden schools with new security measures and equipment. A blue ribbon federal school safety commission led by Education Secretary Betsy DeVos is holding public events around the country, including one in Alabama on that Tuesday. Children are spending class time on active shooter drills, and their parents are buying bulletproof backpacks. Our reporting highlights just how difficult it can be to track school-related shootings and how researchers, educators, and policymakers are hindered by a lack of data on gun violence. So essentially what they're saying here in a long article on all this data and everything is like all these school shootings that you report on, and we've seen pictures of backpacks or shoes or something like that all out on a lawn of all the kids that died from school shootings are not true. It would be far less if the actual data was reported correctly, but that's just not the case. We're not seeing this data actually play out when there is an investigation done. So there's false reporting, and then we pick up the story from there and perpetuate it in a national discussion that's swaying minds about one of our amendments of the Constitution in the Bill of Rights that is extremely important. I would argue the most important amendment that protects all the other ones in the Bill of Rights from having the government infringe on that. And we're having this national discussion, and they're basing it on data that's false. It's not a fair conversation. Keeping up with politics here, let's go to Clinton. Not Hillary Clinton either. It's actually Chelsea Clinton. And we were talking about religion a little bit earlier. Let's see what she had to say about abortion.
Whenever we talk about Roe, we're talking, that fight has been happening through the entirety of our lives. My mother had that fight. My grandmother had that. I mean, how can you keep from like the generational exhaustion?
When I think about all of the statistics that are painful of what women are confronting, Zerlina, today in our country, and what even more women confronted pre-Roe, and how many women died, and how many more women were maimed because of unsafe abortion practices. We just can't go back to that. Like, that's unconscionable to me. And also, and I'm sure that this will unleash another wave of hate in my direction, but as a deeply religious person, it's also unchristian.
Okay, so that's Chelsea Clinton talking about how it's unchristian for you to not be pro-choice and able to kill babies. As I said before in the post when I originally posted this on Facebook, by the way, if you're interested in seeing what we'll probably be talking about on the next podcast, always follow along with the Facebook page, because I typically take those articles and pick out the ones I specifically want to target and talk about. Ooh, I said target. That's not good. And we typically follow up on those articles throughout the podcast then. What I had mentioned on the posting was I can't be outraged anymore about this kind of stuff. I mean, I'm upset that we have people in this country that will cheer for the killing of babies, and they think that they've been indoctrinated into thinking that there's no other choice, that it's a form of birth control and everything else. It's just disgusting. But for Chelsea Clinton to take this action and say that it's unchristian not to support the killing of babies just shows you how radical that family has always been, how they raised her. It's just ridiculous. There's not much time to spend on that, because it's just so disgusting what that family stands for. And of course, Chelsea Clinton is eventually going to run for political office, and I think pretty soon, if she keeps on trying to interject herself into the spotlight lately. Oh boy, let's get into some topics here. This, according to CNBC, it says iPhone prices would rise up to 20% if Apple assembles in the U.S. like Trump wants, according to Bank of America. Bank of America Merrill Lynch says Apple may respond to pressure from President Trump by asking its partners to bring some iPhone assembly operations into the U.S. The conclusion was for the iPhone not currently impacted by tariffs, moving production 100% of final assembly to the U.S. would need 20% price increases to offset the incremental labor costs, according to the firm's analyst. Okay. So the price of your iPhone could increase by 20% if we move the manufacturing of the iPhone from China over to the United States. So let's think about this for a second. Let's look at the left and why this specific article was written to piss off those people. You're hitting people with one of the things that they love the most, their technology, their personal phone and everything else. We all know how expensive phones can be and everything, right? We were talking about the iPhone X earlier, which is either $1,000 or $1,100 for the iPhone X Max or whatever it is, XS Max. So add another 20% to that. Right? So it gets astronomical with that kind of stuff. So when you hit someone's pocketbook, and no matter what you're talking about, that person is going to be emotionally impacted and more than likely outraged about that and immediately dialed up to the 11 again. But let's take a look at all sides of this story, right? One of the things that's always pointed out is the empathetic, sympathetic side of the left on how people are treated, human rights, equal opportunities for people and everything. But when you look at China the reason why everything's manufactured over there and put together in shoe factories and everything is because it's slave labor. These people don't have, they build suicide nets outside the building so that when the people jump out of the windows, they can't kill themselves because of how bad things are over there. We get our prices at where they are because it's so cheap to produce those things over there. So now you're in a little bit of a conundrum if you're a person on the left, right? You're really upset that that your iPhone's going to cost a lot more, but you would be saving people overseas from the slave labor that they would be doing for producing your iPhone. Because as of right now, you're holding your iPhone and there's a lot of slave labor that went into that. So what's more important to you? Is it your wallet or the people that are being used for slave labor over there? Now, if we bring production here, there's a couple choices you have. You can either pay a little bit more, 20%, that's a lot more, by the way, especially when the price tag is so big. You can either pay more and be hit financially, or guess what? It's one of these great things that us conservatives have always pointed out. It's called the free market. This is an LG phone. You could buy one of these. You are not stuck to just buying an iPhone. The fact of the matter is, you always have these choices available to you, and bringing that production back over here, we can figure something out and actually bring a working economy back into the United States and give more of our own people jobs as a higher consumer of what should be a U.S. product. This is a U.S. product that's manufactured somewhere else for cheaper labor and then brought back to us. Just doesn't make sense. Let's see. Okay, no one was commenting. Speaking of big companies, so that one was about Apple and everything. Bernie Sanders introduces the Bezos Act, slamming Amazon's low wages. Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Ro Khanna, Democrat of California, introduced legislation on Thursday aimed at shaming large profitable corporations like Amazon and Walmart. The Bezos Act would tax corporations for every dollar that their low-wage workers receive in government assistance. Okay. So essentially, if you're making minimum wage and it costs, you have access to welfare or food stamps or anything else to supplement for that job, they're going to be taxed on every dollar that's given in financial aid through the government, right? Now, here's the thing. We've talked about this multiple times too. No one in the United States is, well, there is, I retract that. There is slave labor in places, especially in regards to illegal immigrants that come into our country that are then blackmailed into working at slave rates in order to not have them found out by ICE officials and stuff like that. That's just another great reason, compassionate reason, to try and get people to come here legally so that they're not flying under the radar and not found chained up in the back of laundromats, not able to go to the bathroom for days on end or sleep because no one knows where they are or what's going on and they can't be tracked. That's scary stuff. In this case here, there's no American that is forced into working a certain job for a certain rate of pay. If we're talking about Walmart and Amazon, okay, those people go to that job, they go through the interview, and the person interviewing says to them, just like any other job situation, okay, thank you very much. Here's what the minimum wage is right now. Let's say it's $9 wherever they are, okay? We're gonna hire you on at $9. No one's putting a gun to your head. Do you want this job? Yes. Another way that you could go about that is negotiation tactics. I can't survive on $9. Can you make it $15? They can say yes. They can also very clearly say, no, sorry, this is a minimum wage job. You either work it or you don't. There's a line of people behind you. If not, get the heck out of my office and go find a job that pays you $15 an hour. So we have politicians like Bernie Sanders, who doesn't know anything about owning a business because this guy never worked a day in his life. And I'm not saying that to be a jerk to him or anything. Senator Sanders has never worked a day in his life at another job other than running for political office. He's a bum. Okay? And here we have a guy that promotes socialism, a state of government policies where the government takes care of bums like himself. Except this bum has gotten his hands into the government and profited off of the taxpayer dollars to be able to afford nice fancy things as a rich bum. Anyway, we have these politicians that now are upset with the fact that corporations are hiring at minimum wage labor, providing jobs, that doesn't sound like a bad thing to me, to people that need them. Do those people have to work a second or third job? Yes, but that is their choice. That is the whole foundation of what America was built on, is this ability to make your life what you want, or at least pursue that happiness. That sounds familiar, right? So what you have here is this ability to chase after what you want and for the corporations to pay what they want as well. Now, corporations don't just do this stuff willy-nilly. They don't look at it and say, well, you know, maybe we could hire someone at this rate and test it around for a little bit and see what happens. Corporations, especially at the size of Amazon and Walmart, have everything budgeted down to the penny. They know how much they can afford to pay someone without cutting into major profit margins for the company. Now, what you're trying to say here is kind of along the lines of the MINCOME, the minimum income that they keep on talking about, or raising the minimum wage to $15. If it's $15, why $15? Why not make it $40? Why not make it $100 per hour? That's the question that everybody needs to be asking themselves. The reason is because it's stupid, okay? There actually shouldn't be any minimum income, okay? There shouldn't be any minimum wage. If a company says, okay, great, you're hired. It's how's 25 cents an hour sound to you? You can look them square in the eye and say, okay, that's absolutely horrible, no way. But there may be someone that works that job at that. And who are you to say to the person that's running that company, that's making money, that clearly set the rules out on the table of how much that person was going to be making, that they're not allowed to make 25 cents an hour? You know, if they can do that, that's great for the business owner. But what you're going to run into is a kind of tactic or situation where the person or the accountant or the business owner looks through the books and they say, okay, listen, we can't hire someone at 25 cents an hour because no one's getting in the line for this. We also tried $1, $2, $3, $4. You keep on raising that price until you get to someone that will actually work for you at that price. That is then your floor. Okay? That should be up to the business owners. In this case here, what they're saying is if you're going to pay your employees so little in regards to the income, then we're going to tax you on what you get in government subsidies for those people that they have to apply for. Okay. So what you're saying is I need to raise the minimum wage of our company to a certain level that will satisfy the needs for a MINCOME situation so that they don't have to apply for financial assistance. If that's the case, if the minimum wage in that state is $9 an hour, and in order to live comfortably, it's going to cost $18 an hour for my employees to live comfortably, I have to seriously look at my staff and think about and consider honestly cutting my staff into half and over delegating more jobs to those rest of those people that are left in that company and overworking them to now cover the job of 2 people instead of just them, because I can't financially afford to run my company now that you have cut into my budget and made it mandatory for me to reach that level. And in that case, if you have to cut half of your staff or whatever percentage of your staff and let them go, guess who's going on to full financial assistance from the government at that point? Everyone that you let go. which in the end, conspiracy theory land here, someone like Bernie Sanders would actually want a situation like that, because the more the government can have their hands in your cookie jar to control what you're doing by giving you the money, then the more they have control over everything for you. And they have you by the balls, as they say. I didn't say what kind of balls. Beach balls, basketballs, chocolate balls. So Bernie Sanders and this other guy from California, they need to go back to an economics class that would have been taught in the early 2000s or 90s or prior to that, because I think that economics today are pumping out people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez that still don't understand basic economics. Excuse me. Okay. Main topic for tonight. We have been going through weeks now of the Brett Kavanaugh hearings for President Trump's Supreme Court justice pick to be appointed to the Supreme Court of the land. And it's been a circus, to say the least. Right off the bat, the left tried to block everything up and congest it. And Kamala Harris, Cory Booker were both the ringleaders of this circus, trying to project themselves and make a name for themselves, because 2020 is right around the corner, and both of these people are talked about as potential nominees for the DNC in regards to potential presidential runs. So they're both trying to make a name for themselves and say the most outlandish, stupid, progressive stuff that they can, so they can get the attention of people. Mike Steppen says, "Go Birds." Good. Okay. Gary made a comment, but I'll get back to that maybe later. So let's take a look at some of what was said by Cory Booker. He's the one that we're going to focus on tonight.
We're holding back, not only holding back documents labeling committee confidential, and I'm releasing it to expose that, number one, the emails that are being withheld from the public have nothing to do with national security.
Shame on my colleagues if they conceal them now.
I understand that the penalty comes with potential ousting from the Senate. I'm releasing committee confidential documents.
Mr. Chairman, here's the interesting piece of that. That email, those emails, had already been cleared for release by the committee.
Several other documents that were supposedly, quote unquote, committee confidential were released by Democrats Thursday morning, but it turns out, as I understand it, they were actually pre-cleared for public release.
This is about the closest I'll probably ever have in my life to an I am Spartacus moment.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
The senators, at least, were leading people to believe that they were releasing this against the will of the Republicans. What was then revealed was that, in fact, Republicans had looked at all these documents and prepared to release them, and they were eventually released.
The information that he was talking about had actually already been made publicly available.
Late Wednesday night, GOP Senator Mike Lee vowed to work with Booker to get the documents released, even walking across the room to shake on it. Just after 11 a.m. this morning, Booker released 4 documents via email and Twitter and said this about Cornyn.
I think he was just like most bullies are, a lot of talk and no action.
Wondering if the documents were actually those Lee had worked with Booker to release.
If you don't care about classified information read in front of the entire nation, and the rules don't matter to you, even when you can't even violate those rules the right way, out of a stunning amount of incompetence.
That is irresponsible and outrageous, and I hope that the senator will reconsider his decision, because no senator deserves to sit on this committee or serve in the Senate, in my view, if they decide to be a law unto themselves and willingly flout the rules of the Senate and the determination of confidentiality and classification. That is irresponsible and conduct unbecoming a senator.
A short time later, Senate Judiciary Committee staffers told reporters that the documents in question had indeed been cleared by 4 a.m. and that Senators Blumenthal, Booker, Coons, and Leahy had been notified shortly thereafter.
Mr. Kavanaugh has been on the circuit court for 12 years. He has a voluminous record, 307 opinions that he's written. I don't know, that's 10 or 15,000 pages of writings that he's done. Is the best record that other people have said. So I'm going to agree with them. It's the best way of knowing whether or not they should be on the Supreme Court.
In this case here, what you may have missed in the news is the fact that Cory Booker, Senator Booker, I am Spartacus Booker, was referring to emails that he felt were going to show racial profiling on part of Brett Kavanaugh that would shed light on him not being a good choice for a Supreme Court justice. Now, the funny part about that is it actually proved the exact opposite in a situation after 9/11, I think it was. Kavanaugh said, no, I don't think that this is a good idea to be doing the profiling stuff. I'm against that idea. So not only did Kavanaugh, in this case, was proven not to be racist, but Cory Booker was trying to make it seem like he was releasing documents against the Senate rules that could expel him if they weren't declassified already. And in fact, they had already been declassified. He knew the fact. They have video of the people walking across over to him and shaking his hand to let him know that they were cleared for release. And in a sense, what he was trying to do was he was hoping to be expelled from the Senate so that he could make his run for president and be a martyr for the Democratic National Party. And it's just ridiculous that he got caught up in this lie, and finally news media sources caught on and actually saw that he was blatantly lying about this. But leave it to Cory Booker, of all people, to actually double down and refuse to acknowledge the fact that he's wrong in this situation. And I think we've all known people that tell a lie enough times that they start to buy their own crap. That is what Cory Booker does. And he gets called out by Anderson Cooper, of all people.
You've called the process a sham. Do you think Kavanaugh has been honest in his testimony?
I guess the issue is, for me, is that the document release that they've been bragging about, how many thousands of pages they've released, when it comes to the body of his work, it really represents only about 10% of the totality of his documents. In the little bit that we've gotten that's been marked committee confidential, that I continue today, tweeting every day, just pushing these committee confidential documents out against that sham rule, we are seeing already there's a lot of nuggets in there that are worthy of asking this candidate.
Well, speaking of the documents, this morning you said you were going to break Senate rules so you could release documents pertaining to Kavanaugh. You said you were willing to risk expulsion from the Senate to do that. Now Republicans on the committee have said that the documents had already been approved for release before 4 a.m. this morning. Senator Cornyn basically accused you of a political stunt to bolster a possible run for the presidency. Was that just a stunt?
Well, I mean, the amusing thing about that is Cornyn first said is he threatened me. He threatened me with expulsion, said what I was doing was unbecoming to the office I was holding. It's a deep insult for a senator to give to a senator in an environment with lots of collegiality. He was doing that because last night I broke the Senate rules by reading from that email. And then today, throughout the entire day, this is not just about one email, I've already released over 20 committee confidential documents in violation of what they say are the Senate rules, in which Cornyn said I should be expelled for. So according to Cornyn's rules, it's a lot of talk, a lot of bluster right now. I am breaking the rules. But I was raised and taught that an unjust law, you almost have an obligation to stand against it. So I am violating those laws. I have been doing all day. And it was an unjust law. You see, there's no consequence. They will not move to expel me from the Senate for violating the committee confidential rules. And I will continue to do so because I believe the public has the right to know where he stands on these issues.
But I guess the question is, was it really a violation? Because at this point, I mean, to be clear, Bill Burke, the President Bush's presidential record representative, said he cleared the documents before 4 a.m. per your staff's request, and that they had told you you could use them publicly. Grassley's office also confirmed you were told that the restrictions on the documents had been waived before you spoke today. So how do you square that with the idea that, with what you've said?
Well, I square that very easily. Number one, last night I broke the rules before they even, then they scrambled to release the document. But I continue to release documents. I've released 20 so far that they have not cleared. I am breaking the rules. I am breaking the sham rules. 20 documents. If you check my Twitter feed, anybody in the public now can have access to the ones that they wanted to hide. They haven't cleared those yet. Maybe they're rushing to catch up to me and clear those as well. So
the
here
ones
we
you
have a
talked about
process.
today, though, earlier, had those been cleared, and did you know those had been cleared?
Again, when I broke the committee rules last night, those documents had not been cleared.
How many times did this guy say, I broke the rules? I'm breaking the rules. Anderson, you don't understand. I'm breaking the rules, man. I'm a rebel. I'm a rebel, dude. Anderson, you're not listening to me. I'm breaking the rules. I'm a rule breaker. I'm a breaker of rules. I am violating the law. I am trying my hardest here to be Spartacus and grab the attention of the people here because I'm a rule breaker. And if you could just on this little name tag thing on CNN here, if you could just put Cory Rule Breaker Booker while on the ticker here while I'm on here, if you could do that, because I'm a rule breaker. Did you know I'm a rule breaker? I'm a rule breaker. Back to you, Anderson. I'm a rule breaker. It's like, he's so ridiculous. That's all he kept on saying. He just wanted to make a point. I'm a rule breaker, Anderson. No, you're not. Your stuff was cleared, and the handshake, it's like Serena getting caught, for crying out loud. You're doing hand signals to the coach. This guy literally hand shook the guys that cleared the documents so to let him know that those documents were cleared. It's absolutely ridiculous. Moving on here, here's what's really interesting. We went from the document case to now a big just mess, okay? And there may be a hearing on Monday. Now it's possibly being pushed to Wednesday. A woman, first of all, Senator Feinstein of California came out with a statement last week saying that she had a source, anonymous source, who says that Brett Kavanaugh in high school, when they were 17, physically, sexually abused her over the clothes and with like tried to rape her at a party, and she would not come out and testify about it. So you have to go on Feinstein's word that there's a person who is blaming Kavanaugh for a sexual abuse or a sexual harassment at a party that they can't identify with no witnesses 35 years ago in the 80s, that was never reported to the police, never reported to anyone or talked about to anyone until about 2012 when she brought it up with her therapist. And we don't know who it is, and you should just go on that word. And it was released on the very last day or the day after the hearings of Kavanaugh. Now, here's the interesting thing. That person apparently got that information to Feinstein 2 months ago. So that means that Feinstein sat on that for 2 months before releasing it after the Kavanaugh hearings, where Kavanaugh couldn't be questioned about said activity. Well, it caused a really big political storm, obviously, because Kavanaugh's appointal vote is coming up this coming week, and the Democrats were trying to prolong that and delay it with as many tactics as possible until they had more majority in the Senate to overrule the actual appointing of Kavanaugh and hold off the process indefinitely until they got another Democrat into the presidential office. In this case, though, what happened was it caused such a storm that it's ridiculous for us to go on the premise that some anonymous person is saying things that they can't even concretely talk about, and we're not allowed to question them or anything. And we're supposed to delay this hearing and everything, the appointal of this guy to the Supreme Court based on some crazy outlandish thing said by someone who doesn't want to be recognized at all. Well, this woman who's a professor at a university out in California, I believe it is now, Professor Ford, came out and said that this happened to her. It was when they were 17. She says that there were 2 people in the room, that eventually the other guy jumped on the pile. I don't know if he was trying to stop the altercation or if he was joining in on it, and it knocked everyone loose. She ran out of the room, hid in the bathroom, and then left the party. Unfortunately, that doesn't corroborate with what she said to her therapist back in 2012 when she told the therapist that it was 4 people that were in the room. So already her story is watered down and screwed up and not going off of anything. On top of that, she never mentioned Kavanaugh's name to the therapist. She just said it was an elite school with notable people that have gone on to bigger things now. On top of that, we have Feinstein and the Democratic Party, who sat on this information for 2 months and decided to come out with it on the day after the last day of the hearings for Kavanaugh. Now, what this should tell you is one very big important thing. Number one, that the Democrats don't care about what happened or didn't happen to this woman, okay? And the reason why I say that is because if they did, this would have been brought out 2 months ago, okay? To use it as political leverage to hold off the appointment of Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court Justice as a Supreme Court Justice is a political tactic that is, she's being used as a tool right now. They don't care anything about what happened to this woman, okay? This is just now being used to prolong an incident from happening. And there was a great analogy I had. Oh, you know what? Keeping with football. I know that it's a tactic in football that once you are at the 2-minute marker for the 4th quarter, okay, if you can get a first down, you can take a knee and let the time clock run out, okay, each time at the point of scrimmage and everything. And that is, it's always gotten under my skin that exists, that you're allowed to do that instead of it stopping the clock when you take a knee. And I understand it's a tactic. To me, it seems like a shady sports tactic to end the game and not actually play out the game professionally. I understand what they're doing. In this case, it's almost like the taking a knee tactic for the Democrats to keep on prolonging this and let the time clock run out and leave things to hit last second so that they can prolong this thing and just drag it out so that they can win in the end. And it's absolutely ridiculous to me. Booker is one of the ones that's been fighting against Kavanaugh on this. Of course, he's been fighting him on everything. But Booker was just caught red-handed for doing the exact thing that he's accusing Kavanaugh of doing, except Booker actually admitted it himself in an old article. So this is according to Fox News. It says New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker is facing accusations of hypocrisy over his calls to delay the confirmation vote of Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh amid sexual misconduct allegations, as he once admitted to groping a friend without her consent in high school. New Year's Eve, 1984, I will never forget. I was 15. As the ball dropped, I leaned over to hug a friend, and she met me instead with an overwhelming kiss. As we fumbled on the bed, I remember debating my next move as if it were a chess game. This is what Booker wrote in the student-run Stanford Daily newspaper in 1992. With the Top Gun slogan ringing in my head, I slowly reached for her breast. After having my hand pushed away once, I reached my mark. Our groping ended soon, and while no relationship ensued, a friendship did. You see, the next week in school, she told me that she was drunk that night and didn't really know what she was doing. Booker's intent of the column was to detail his transformation from a 15-year-old who was trotting around the bases and stealing second to someone who was called a man-hater over his pro-woman views. In retrospect, my soliloquy titled The Oppressive Nature of Male-Dominated Society and Its Violent Manifestations, Rape, Anorexia, Battered Wives may have been a surreptitious Yeah. Attempt to convince her that I was a sensitive man, but more likely I was trying to convince myself that my attitudes had changed. Says, but the now senator came back to the topic a few months later in 1992, penning another article that mentioned the controversial column, which he said was about date rape, and admitted that his actions were at odds with his beliefs. But by my second column, as I raised my noble pen to address the issue of date rape, I realized that the person holding it wasn't so noble after all. With this issue, as with so many others, a dash of sincere introspection has revealed to me a dangerous gap, a gap between my beliefs and my actions. So Cory Booker outright admits to sexually groping someone who is drunk, that he's accusing Kavanaugh of doing, without there being actual evidence or anything that points to the fact that Kavanaugh did anything. But Booker remembers that he did do this and admits to it. So should he even be senator, or should he step down? He certainly shouldn't be president. That should be brought up when he runs for president, because if Kavanaugh, a Supreme Court justice nominee, would be appointed to a lifetime term on the bench, if he's being held back from doing that based on wild accusations with no concrete evidence at this point, then why shouldn't Booker be held back from a 4 or 8 year term as president for things that he fully admits to doing? That's for you to think about. Then we also have Ted Cruz chiming in on the events of the hearings and what he had to say, which makes a lot of sense. So let's take a look at what Ted Cruz had to say.
So why is it that the Democrats are putting so much energy in saying hand over all of those documents? Because they know beyond a shadow of doubt that President George W. Bush's White House team is not going to allow every piece of paper that went to the president to be made public any more than any other White House would. Republican or Democrat, no White House would allow every piece of paper that went to and from the president to be made public. Indeed, there are rules and laws and procedures for when and how presidential papers become public. And the reason the Democrats are fighting so loudly on this issue is they're making a demand they know is impossible to meet, and by the way, is utterly irrelevant to what actually Judge Kavanaugh thinks, believes, or has said. It would open up all sorts of fishing expeditions to attack, relitigate George W. Bush's record as president and what various cabinet members and senior advisors might or might not have said. But it is, at the end of the day, simply an attempt to distract and delay. And indeed, the multiple motions we've seen from Democrats, delay this confirmation, that reveals the whole joke. Their objective is delay. So what is this fight about? If it's not about documents, if it's not about Judge Kavanaugh's credentials, if it's not about his judicial record, what is this fight about? I believe this fight is nothing more and nothing less than an attempt by our Democratic colleagues to relitigate the 2016 presidential election. 2016 was a hard-fought election all around. And it was the first presidential election in 60 years where Americans went to the polls with a vacant seat on the Supreme Court, one that the next president would fill. Americans knew who had been in that seat, the late Justice Antonin Scalia, one of the greatest jurists ever to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court. And it was the first time since President Dwight D. Eisenhower's re-election campaign that a Supreme Court seat was directly on the ballot. Both candidates knew the importance of the vacant Supreme Court seat, and it was a major issue of contention in the presidential election. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were both clear about what kind of justices and judges they would appoint. During all three presidential debates, both candidates were asked what qualities were most important to them when selecting a Supreme Court justice. Secretary Clinton's answer was clear. She wanted a Supreme Court justice who would be a liberal progressive, willing to rewrite the U.S. Constitution, willing to impose liberal policy agendas that she could not get through the democratic process, that the Congress of the United States would not adopt, but that she hoped 5 unelected lawyers would force on the American people. That's what Hillary Clinton promised for her judicial nominees. Then candidate Donald Trump gave a very different answer. He said he was looking to appoint judges in the mold of Justice Scalia, He said he wanted to appoint judges who would interpret the Constitution based on its original public meaning, who would interpret the statutes according to the text, and who would uphold the rule of law and treat parties fairly, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Then candidate Donald Trump also did something that no presidential candidate has done before. He published a list of nominees that he would choose from when filling Justice Scalia's seat, providing unprecedented transparency to the American people. All of this was laid before the American people as they went to the polls on November 8th, 2016. And the American people made a choice that night. Now, my Democratic colleagues are not happy with the choice the American people made. But as President Obama famously said, elections have consequences.
A couple things there. Number one, Ted Cruz was on point with a lot of things, but especially the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court is specifically there to interpret the Constitution and use it as a filter for anything that comes to them, okay? Now, Antonin Scalia and Clarence Thomas are definitely two very good Supreme Court justices that use the Constitution as a filter. You have people like Kagan and I forget the other woman's name. They're emotional judges. They vote based on the emotion of the topic that's being discussed. That is not the type of judge that you want on the Supreme Court. The other thing is, too, what he said was, you know, you have to give President Trump credit. He released a list of the types of judges he would pick, the specific names of the people he would pick for the people to actually vote on as part of his agenda to get through. They knew what they were voting for. With Hillary Clinton, you just didn't. With any president in the past, you didn't know who you were getting unless they specifically said who they were going to pull. So I find that very fascinating. Now, a friend, surprisingly, of Antonin Scalia before he died was actually one of the left's heroes on the Supreme Court, and that was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. RBG, a documentary, was recently released, and it looks horrible. But, yeah. You can actually see the trailer for it. It's actually pretty funny. This, according to the Washington Times, it says Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on Wednesday criticized the Senate hearings for Judge Brett M. Kavanaugh and lamented that the confirmation process had devolved into a highly partisan show since she was confirmed in 1993. The way it was right. The way it is wrong, the 85-year-old justice said during a discussion at George Washington University Law School, prompting a round of applause. Justice Ginsburg was confirmed to the bench by a U.S. Senate vote of 96-3, 2 months after she was nominated by then-President Bill Clinton. The liberal justice said Wednesday that the atmosphere back then was truly bipartisan. The vote on my confirmation was 96-3, even though I had spent about 10 years of my life litigating cases under the auspices of the ACLU. No senator asked me any questions, not about that. Justice Ginsburg also noted that the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia was confirmed 98-0, despite his conservative leanings. Think of Justice Scalia, who's certainly a known character in, what was it, 1986? The vote was unanimous. Every Democrat and every Republican voted for him. That's the way it should be instead of what it's become, which is a highly partisan show. The Republicans move in lockstep and so do the Democrats. I wish I could have a magic wand and have it go back to the way it was. So even one of the most liberal justices, Ginsburg, who the left holds up and makes documentaries about because they think that she's so freaking fantastic, is saying the Democrats are acting ridiculous in this. And to be honest with you, the way that the Republicans acted with Garland when Obama was in office was a little despicable as well. Now, the reason why I say that is because they didn't give him his day in court with his hearing. They didn't allow a vote to happen because the election for the president was right around the corner, and it should be a vote for the American people, as kind of like what Ted Cruz was saying. But the fact of the matter is, even if they had allowed it a vote, there was a majority of Republicans, and they could have said, no, we don't want that. And then it would have gone on through another process, and that would have been held up and gone through so many different things that eventually you would have the presidential election, and it would be held off until then anyway. But he was never given his day because of the Republicans, and I think that that has a lot to do with the reason why the Democrats are acting the way they are today. But again, we have this mentality, this outrage, where we keep on stooping to each other's level, and instead of taking care of fires and putting them out with each other, we're throwing gasoline on them, for crying out loud. It just doesn't make any sense. So anyway, I'm glad that you joined me tonight. That was 2.5 hours of straight talking, which is always really tough for anyone. But you know, hopefully Mike is back and we get the studio a little bit better done, and some of this stuff back here, you can see a partial of it right here, painted up nice, and you'll see I have some interesting things that I'm working on for it. So if you watched tonight or listened, you can always find me on Facebook. Search for the Generation Y Conservative. Hit follow and like. Hit subscribe and the bell on YouTube. Hit the follow button on Twitter. It's @GenYConservative without the E on the end. You can always find and subscribe to the audio podcast on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and Spreaker, all thanks to KLRN Internet Radio, which broadcasts this on Sundays from 3 to 6 p.m. In the meantime, have a great night, and God bless America.